going to record if I can. All right. So chapter 12 is just kind of a basic overview of how to give a speech. So how many of you have given a speech before? Maybe you can just put in the chat. Ty says she's given a speech. Anybody else? Yeah, some of you have. Awesome. Lots of you have. Yay. Perfect. So anybody want to share their experience with giving a speech?
I used to give one when I was stationed up in Washington. I was part of the Airmen's Against Drunk Driving organization. And so every time we would have a new group of airmen come to our base, they would go through our in-processing. And part of that was me giving a speech to the new group of people, telling them about when's the last time we had a DUI on base, what we do to prevent DUIs associated with our airmen, the number they can call, and it was all volunteers. So it's somebody from on base or a spouse or somebody that will come pick you up from, you know, the bar downtown and bring you home. So that way we can prevent further DUIs. And then explain to them that it is an option, but it shouldn't be your first line of defense. You should already have something set up. But if there's a breakdown somewhere in your chain of what you had planned, then we're always there for you. So you didn't have to worry about, you know, can I afford a taxi, or I can't afford, you know, I don't even think Uber was really big at that time, but it was a free ride home and it was safe, and that was our main goal. And so that's the speech or whatever I had to give, like every other week or every week for a little while.
Wow, so it sounds like more of an informative speech, maybe a little persuasive too, right? Please stay safe, it's important. Awesome. So what were some things that you did to prepare for your speech?
Well, first somebody trained me on it, and it was a little bit of research, more of, I was already volunteering in the organization for a while, so I already knew how a lot of it worked. And then making sure I had like a little fact sheet stuff to pass out, so that way I can stay on track and make sure I cover all of our bullet points and nothing was left out, so they would have all the information. And of course, you know, contact cards, so they always have a card to keep with them in case they need to reach us for a ride or just additional information. So I think that's pretty much all the preparation.
Yeah, so those are some really good tips for us as far as how we can prepare for our speeches too. You know, you can always, it's a little bit different when you're standing up in front of people, and you know, you can have your little note cards or whatever, but when we're on Zoom meetings, we can have our notes right in front of us and, you know, just be able to go through those. And I always like to have notes as well, or some little bullet point sheet. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to share?
Not the exact same, but I had to do a maid of honor speech. And yes, and I have to do another one shortly. But my friend loves, that was getting married, she loves Disney music. And I'd rather sing, even though I can't sing, than speak. So I did a bunch of Disney parody, like theme songs that like involved her and her husband. And yeah, it was super cute.
That is so cute. So that's a good example of thinking about your audience, right? And that's a big deal when we're giving a speech, no matter what kind of speech it is, to just think about your audience and what they like or who they are, their level of knowledge, those kinds of things. That's awesome. Very good. Anybody else? I can remember, well, the one speech that really sticks out in my mind was when I graduated from my junior college I gave the speech for graduation. And that was super nerve-wracking. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. And I wrote it all out, and then worked with one of my professors to like help me kind of massage it, and wordsmith it. And I practiced and practiced. And then when I got up there, it was like I forgot everything that was in my head. And anyways, I was glad that I had my notes. But yeah, practice is definitely a thing. Writing it out has been helpful for me too. So what about, have any of you had to sit through like a really bad speech? Yeah, what are some things that made you feel that it was a bad speech?
I was embarrassed and I wasn't giving the speech.
You were embarrassed? What was going on? Like, what was embarrassing?
I mean, they would just stumble on their words a lot, and it seemed like they were, I mean, one of them was literally sweating, like kept wiping their forehead. Just seemed like they weren't prepared at all.
That's the ultimate terrible speech, when you feel so bad for the person that's up there, right? Oh my goodness.
I feel like a lot of the times, like speeches that are just miserable to sit through and listen to is when people are like very repetitive in what they're saying and they don't move on. They just repeat themselves and say the same thing 8 different ways. And you're like, okay, we've heard this. Like, we've been talking about the same thing for an hour. Like, let's move on to the next.
Wow, yeah.
Just rip my hair out.
For sure. That does get old.
Like when people have like a safety word that they use to keep talking, like they'll say right over and over, or like, that's
Or exactly. And then it's like, is it that perception thing that kind of kicks in where then that's all you can hear? Like you can't hear anything else but their ums or
yeah. And it could be the greatest speech ever, but if I pick up on that, that's it.
Yep. What else? Any other character?
In one of my high school college prep class, there was this kid and he always used to clear his throat and say all the time. So it was so bad, and he stood up in front of the class all the time. He wanted to be the one to present, but everybody started just counting how many times he did each of those.
Aw, poor guy. I feel bad for him.
I remember one of my high school teachers, I think she was like my junior year English teacher. Her thing was "okay." So after everything she'd say, she'd go "okay." And so we used to do the same thing. We used to count how many times she'd say it. And we'd say, "Miss Blea, you're on number 6 now for the last 5 minutes." She would get so frustrated because she's like, "I don't need to." And I'm like, "You're making us all crazy. We're not paying attention to what you're saying. Just counting how many times you say "okay."
You like put little hash marks on your paper, like 25 little lines. For me, I can remember the Association for Surgical Technology. They have, every state has like a state assembly for AST, and they put together these annual trainings, and they're all day long. You get there at 7 in the morning, you're there till 5 p.m. They give you a lunch, but it's just speaker after speaker after speaker. And so we had this one topic was going to be on the Da Vinci robot. And so we were all excited because we're like, the Da Vinci robot is awesome. And it ended up being a vendor who was a rep for the company, talking about, literally, it felt like he was trying to sell a Da Vinci robot to us. It was the worst. It was boring. It was statistics. It was charts. It was graphs. Like, I really felt like, you know, we're surge techs, we want to see surgery. Like the whole room is full of surge techs. We want to see pictures, we want to hear about how it works, you know, the hands-on stuff. Maybe he could have brought some components that attach to it and we could have like touched those and played with those, whatever. But his consideration for the audience was not there. I think he's probably just giving the same speech that he gives when he talks to surgeons, was what it sounded like. And maybe he was hoping that we would encourage our facilities to buy a Da Vinci. I don't know. But he did not consider his audience. And it was really boring. And it was towards the end of the day, and most of us were falling asleep because of it. So then what makes a really good speech then? Do you guys have some memories of good speeches, like awesome speeches? Only the bad ones stick out?
I like speeches where like it interacts with the audience, because then it kind of keeps your attention. Or like you said, you just have to appeal to your audience. Like, I mean, you have to stay on topic as well, but if it's just like you're just sitting there and spitting out facts, which I've definitely given boring speeches for sure, but
I'm sure I have too, but getting the audience involved, that's definitely a game changer. I agree. Yep. And that's our last little bullet point about, you know, how do we make it engaging for the audience? How do we get our audiences involved when we're speaking?
Questions, asking questions.
Absolutely.
Or personal experience, like think of a time that you ... something like that.
Great example. Any other thoughts?
Just making it relatable.
Good one. Absolutely. Relating to your audience, that's a big one. Something that we can do in Zoom that I think is really cool is just give a poll, right? You're like, oh, you're talking about 10% of all the population is left-handed. So you're like, okay, really quick, I'm just going to launch this poll and let me know if you're left-handed or right-handed. I was teaching an A&P class and we were talking about blood types. And so I had a little poll and I'm like, okay, are you A, B, O? Let's see what percentage of our class has which blood type, and, you know, kind of make it a little bit more relatable and get them engaged as well. Any other thoughts?
Don't talk monotone, like use levels in your voice.
Definitely. Inflection is very important. Except for mine right now doesn't have very much. So will we use this as surge text public speaking? Do you guys think?
Mm-hmm.
How do you think we'll use it?
communicating with the surgeon.
Definitely. What
Not
up?
the surgeon, but the whole team as well.
Yep. There's a nurse in there, right? We got to communicate with them too. So whoever's in there, that's a possibility. Communicate with any of them for sure.
What about the patient before they go under?
Potentially, if we're in like what I call the traditional role where we're scrubbed in and setting up our field, that's typically when the patient comes in. So there's not a lot of interaction that we do have with the patient in that instance. But if the patient has like a local anesthetic, they're, you know, just getting some numbing medicine, or they're staying awake, or maybe they have a light anesthetic or something, could definitely be a conversation with the patient to, you know, Not so much though. But if we're not scrubbed in, then, you know, we could be helping our circulating nurse, like get the patient onto the table and those kinds of things. And so definitely that applies there too. I was almost thinking too of like, you know, as we become more seasoned, we may move into a specialty role as a surge tech. You could be an ortho tech, a lead ortho tech, or a lead ENT tech or something like that. And as there's like new products or equipment or those kinds of things, you might be teaching the rest of the staff how to use those things, or maybe what specific surgeon likes and how they use it. So that might be another way that we use public speaking. Mrs. Brombeck, remember, she went on to be a laser safety officer. So she went around to all the banners and helped them establish laser safety practices and persons and policies and procedures and stuff. So that was one thing that she's passionate about. So she helped with that as well. And then she's also a CPR instructor and she teaches all of our CPR classes here as well. So kind of non-traditional roles. Okay, we've been on this slide long enough. Let me see if I can get it to change slides. I don't know. My computer hates me. Oh, oops. I need to go back. Okay, here we are. Okay, so general purposes of speaking. So speaking to inform, right? We talked about how informative speeches are like teaching somebody about something. So giving them some more information, raising their awareness. Example could be HIV/AIDS awareness and prevention. Speeches to persuade, on the other hand, we are wanting to change someone's thinking about something, change their beliefs or broaden their perspective, change their perception. And then speeches to entertain, which is always fun, is just the focus is to entertain or amuse or to please listeners with whatever you are telling them. So, you know, having a specific purpose or objective for your speech is going to be important. And so we chose our topics, but there needs to be some sort of goal. So a couple examples could be, you want to convince your listener that gun control policies negatively impact individuals, right? Could be persuasive type of speech, or a speech where you would want to raise awareness of the audience's understanding of some sort of process, right? Would be more informative. So we have kind of a target for our speech, and don't go off on tangents. It's a good idea to have what's called a thesis statement. And the thesis statement is kind of a short, precise sentence or statement. That's the main idea of your speech. And every single thing that you include in your speech, everything you say should relate back to that thesis statement, right? A lot of times, you know, when you're writing a paper, the thesis statement is in your introduction. And whenever I write papers, I write my introduction last. Because sometimes I'm not sure what path my paper is going to take. And it's easier for me to come back and write the thesis statement after I've kind of presented all of my information. So sometimes it is easier to write it at the end. And then here's some examples of an ineffective thesis statement. Might be, think twice before you decide you're for gun control, but a more effective thesis would be gun control jeopardizes individuals' rights and safety. So you're really being specific about what you're going to talk about. And then we talked about this, but knowing your audience, right? You guys are going to be preparing a speech for each other. So it's, you know, as you're doing your introductions and this Flipgrid thing, and you're talking in your threaded discussions and those kinds of things, you're getting to know your audience. And so you want to reflect on that, and you want to adjust your speech accordingly. Considering your audience's demographics is always a good thing too. What's their age? You know, where do they live? What, you know, those kinds of things is important as well. Males, females, whatever. And then discover what they already know. You know, if you're talking to a room full of lay people and you want to, you know, share some sort of health information or medical information with them, and you're using big medical words and terminology, they're not going to understand what you're saying, right? So you need to think about words that you can use that mean the same thing, but that are more layman's terms. And then the reverse would be true. If you're talking to a room full of surgeons, you don't need to do that. And you're actually probably going to be expected to use more professional medical language. Digital media and public speaking. So just some reminders that you can utilize Google, right? Will help you to find some things. Sometimes when I'm in the online library, my keywords that I'm trying to use are not working. And sometimes that happens. The library is the best place to go for your information because there's a higher chance that the sources will be credible. But sometimes what helps me is to go to Google and do a Google search. And depending on what I get, I can identify additional keywords that I can then go back to the library and use. But, you know, everything that you are going to consider using for a speech or a paper that's a resource, you want to make sure that it's credible, and you want to evaluate it critically. You know, you want to do some critical thinking. It could be some sort of paper that's in the online library, a research study or something like that, but maybe it's on Colgate toothpaste and it's saying, yes, you know, we did a survey and everybody says that Colgate toothpaste is the best toothpaste. And then you find that it was sponsored by Colgate. All right, probably not as credible, right? Because whoever funded the study, Colgate, also found that their toothpaste was the best toothpaste, might not be as credible. So we always want to, you know, do some critical thinking about the information that we're finding and not just, you know, use it without thinking. Does that make sense? Questions about any of that stuff? Comments? Okay, so developing public speeches. We need evidence, especially when we're doing some sort of persuasive speech, but also when we're doing informative speeches too. So if you put out some sort of statistic, you know, you want to make sure that it's from a credible source and that whatever claim you're making, you're supporting it with evidence. If you're going to use someone's exact words, like I was talking about before, like if you find something that you just can't put into other words and it's just like this great thing that you need to use in your speech or in your paper, then you know, you want to make sure that it's a source that your listeners know and respect, that it's accurate, and that it's unbiased. What is unbiased? What do you guys, how would you define unbiased, and what can we do to kind of reduce that?
I mean, unbiased is neutral, basically.
Yep, you got it. Not taking a side, right? Is it possible for humans to be completely unbiased?
I don't think so.
No, it's not. It's not. But if we're in that role of the researcher, we want to be as unbiased as possible when, you know, when we're doing research. But, you know, if it's persuasive, that's kind of a different story. But, you know, if you're going to use somebody's exact words, that these are some of the things that you want to think about. Visual aids. So it's kind of nice not to have just a whole bunch of writing on your PowerPoint slide, and maybe have some images or video embedded or something like that. So visual aids are helpful. Charts can be helpful. And if you have a list of information, instead of just listing it out on the PowerPoint slide, maybe a chart might be a good visual. So those are some things to think about to reinforce ideas or present information. Some things we want to think about with visual aids is we want to make sure they're large enough and they're clear and they're legible and they're simple to understand, and they're not distracting. So how many visual aids should you have in a 5-minute speech? This is how you figure it out. You take your length of your speech, you divide it by 2, and you add 1, and that should be your maximum number of visuals. Hold on one second. Yeah. No, it's okay. Come in. I'm in class. What's up?
I just need my book.
Oh, it's right there. Yep. She is at clinical sites. Yeah. Good to see you. Okay. Questions about any of that stuff? Okay, so I have a couple videos. I'm scared to play videos. Okay. Let me see. I got a couple. Actually, I think maybe I just want to play. I have one speech I want to play for you. I have a bad speech and a good speech, but let me see if I can get the good, my favorite speech going. The Dell guy really needs to work on my computer. It's sickly. Not quite 2 o'clock yet. Okay. I will pull it up on the break. I don't know what it is with me and videos these days. I have the hardest time teaching from campus because the connection is so slow that I can't get any of my stuff to work. It's so much easier at home. Now it's playing. My computer is going crazy. Stop it. Are you guys hearing this girl?
I hear like whispers. I don't really hear.
Oh, you hear whispers?
Yeah, no, I don't really hear speech. And should we be seeing something right now? Because I don't.
I'm not sharing. I was trying to get this. I'm closing her. Can't. Let me see if I can. Somebody's messaging me. That was my example of a bad speech. I'm going to try to see if I can get this, my favorite one, going here for you guys. You can hear it. Okay. All right, let's see. Let's give it a shot. You're only as good as your technology. Can you guys hear? Can you hear or no?
I could barely hear.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like it's playing in like the background of you. Like it's weird.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can put my volumes at like 77. But hold on, let me check one more thing. I stopped sharing just so I can check my same as system. Okay, so that should be right. When I was teaching from home, I didn't teach with my school computer because it's just not, it seems not as usual.
This is for all the graduates.
Can you guys hear?
You're graduating from high school, college, talking from out there.
Yeah.
Like flat hats and dream. It sort of looks like potentially. Dream about life. Dream about what's next. Dream about a world where people go home. I mean, like, can't basic jump with my friends. Looking at you like a dream. Life is like a really good sandwich. It's all I make it. So not the good stuff. We're there for the good stuff, people. We know first moment, here we are. It's a good moment. All moments are if you take a moment. As I look out here today, I see potential. I see future surgeons and future teachers, future Beyoncés. I'll take that back because I was not Beyonce. You know what? We are Beyonce. Beyonce, be your own Beyonce. Just because you're in it. You have something to meet. You have to and each and every time you ever reach. Because everybody awesome stuff happens. Don't get lost. Start hitting play. It won't be easy, but anything can happen, right? I mean, have you seen that? It's sort of like a dog playing basketball. There are like 18 of those movies. 8 of those. They think it is possible, but they did it. Nothing impossible.
So what did you think? Was that a good speech or a bad speech?
It was a good one because he's just so freaking cute.
I know.
My attention.
I love him so much. He cracks me up.
It definitely was entertaining.
Oh, I love him. Yeah. So entertaining. He was cute. That always helps. What else? What else made it good?
I felt motivated to get up and go do something. I'm not 100% sure what, but I just knew I needed to get up and go do something.
I think it was the enthusiasm behind the words.
Right? You could tell he had like passion and charm and enthusiasm. It was awesome. I agree. It made me smile. Right? What else? Anything else that you guys thought made it really great? Okay, so I expect all of you to dance at the end of your speeches. Okay, no, just kidding. You don't have to. It's okay. Yeah, so I thought that was a super cute example of just how an entertaining speech should be, right? Okay, let's see what else we have here. The other one was this girl talking about fish. It was like super monotone. She's making no eye contact. It was the worst. Okay. So how should we organize our speech? It's going to be different from written communication because we want it to have good transitions. We want it to flow from topic to topic. We also want to make sure that it all fits under our thesis statement, right? Oops. Boy, okay. So some PowerPoint tips. If you ask me, use the notes section, right? As you're presenting, you can, as you're making your slides, you can put notes down in the bottom. You can print those out and have those for your real deal presentation, right? Keep the wording on the slides pretty concise. You don't want to just have a bunch of text that you're reading. Perhaps use trigger words, so little bullet points with just a couple words or something that's going to trigger what you want to say. And then speaking clearly and slowly and trying to reduce the amount of fluff words like right or you know or okay or any of those things. Maintaining eye contact, that's a big deal too. Use logical organization tactics. Make sure that you have a clear beginning, middle, and end. And then practice. On PowerPoint, you can actually record yourself talking on every single slide. It will also give you like the length of total time that you are talking, so you can adjust that. We're trying to stay at about 5 minutes. So the more you practice, the more succinct it will be. So you can get an idea by recording yourself and listening to that, or just seeing if somebody else will lend an ear or practicing in front of the mirror. What else? Any other PowerPoint tips that you guys have that you've given speeches before? Helpful hints, anything? I covered it all? Nothing? Okay. Designing the introduction. In the beginning, I remember my only speech class that I ever had. The only thing I remember from that class is him saying, you need to start off your speech with a joke or like something funny, something that's going to catch the reader's attention. Even when you're writing a paper, kind of want to put something interesting that's going to draw your reader in. So how can we do that? What are some things that you guys that have given speeches or we've all heard speeches, What are some things that captured your attention? Besides a joke, you can't use that, I already used it.
I guess just introducing yourself with kind of like a high energy and like kind of waking up the audience. I'm not really sure.
Like kid president, right? Just
yeah.
having that enthusiasm. I think that definitely captures your listeners' attention.
I feel like also if you start off with like a good question to get everyone like thinking, like just be, you know, on top of being enthusiastic and being funny and, you know, just having a bubbly personality to begin with. And then starting it off with a good question that's going to make everyone be like, you know what, actually they're right. Like, what is that? Or, you know, and just get everyone kind of thinking about what you're going to talk about.
Absolutely. I think that's a great suggestion. Anybody else? Sometimes for me, I like to use like crazy statistics or something that's like kind of unbelievable, but it's really true, like show a picture or give some statistics, just some food for thought, something to get my audience kind of like, that's interesting. Like, I wonder what else, you know, where is this going to go? Or what is she going to say? So kind of whet their appetite a little bit. In my dissertation is on learning games. And my introduction, I talk about the very first learning games that were ever discovered. And it's a little, you know, something that probably most people don't know about, some interesting history just to kind of to kick it off. So that's what I like to do. So again, clear thesis statement, building credibility. How do you build credibility? Anybody know when you're speaking?
When you feel confident talking in front of people, like if they see you that you're confident, they will start listening to you because they think that you're right or something like that.
Sure. Confidence is a big one, right? If you're confident about what you're talking about, then that was definitely be conveyed to your audience.
Citing sources that are reliable, or like if you're talking about something like, I don't know, like candy or something like that, like saying like, oh, M&M, or I don't know, like some kind of company or somebody who's like an expert on something, just citing that type of person.
Yep, absolutely. And that's a good example of relating to your audience too, right? That's something, if you are talking about candy, you wouldn't want to talk about the kinds that most people don't even know about if you are going to, you know, want to gain credibility or relevance or whatever. Yep, I agree. Sources are important. What about your expertise as the speaker? Does that play a role?
If you're able to like answer questions people have as well.
Absolutely.
Maybe giving experiences that you have firsthand with your topic, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. You might also, you know, when you're introducing yourself, if you are like, if I'm talking about surgical technology, one thing that I do that I think gives me credibility is my years of experience doing this, right? So I've been a surgical tech for 21 years, and I'm here to talk to you about the field of surgical technology and maybe having it as a career and what surgical techs do. And just in a couple sentences, I've kind of established my credibility with you that I'm not, you know, oh, I'm I'm a mechanic and I work at Big O and I'm here to talk to you about surge tech, right? If I was here to talk to you about cars and changing tires, then that would be a different story. But sometimes that expertise that you have can lend credibility to yourself as well. Let's see, what else? Managing apprehension. Speaking in front of people can be a little unnerving. That's totally natural. There's a very small percentage of people that feel absolutely comfortable talking in front of people without any qualms whatsoever. So give yourself grace, practice, positive self-talk. That's always a big one as well. So let's take a little bit of a break, and then we'll come back and talk about informative speaking and persuasive speaking. Any questions so far before I give you guys a break? Or comments?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So you know how you were talking about like keeping eye contact? I can like understand when you're like talking in front of people. How are we supposed to keep eye contact over Zoom?
I know that's a little bit more difficult for sure, but I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I think the thing is to try to like just look up and kind of face your camera instead of being like, you know, you're doing your speech like this kind of thing and somebody's seeing the top of our heads or whatever the case may be. So I think just you know, kind of looking up and at your screen is the best that we can do, because my camera is right here. So does it look like I'm looking straight at you guys? But like Christy's over here. So I turned to look at her little Hollywood square, but now it doesn't look like I'm looking straight on. You know, that was like the hardest thing when I did a hand washing thing for AZTV. And they're like, okay, now look straight at your camera. So I couldn't look at like the news guy, right? Because we did it remotely. And so, and I can't remember what platform we used, but Skype, I think. Yeah, Skype. But it was so weird because I was like staring at the light while he was like asking me questions and stuff. And that just doesn't seem normal. It felt really weird. So yeah, I think that's the best that we can do.
I have a question.
Yes.
For the PowerPoint, would I be able to use a personal picture?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be fine.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, then it is 2 o'clock. So let's take until 2:15. How does that sound? All right, I will see you guys in a few minutes. All right, let's see where we were. Where are we? I think this is where we were. Was sharing my PowerPoint with you. We are past the bird singing. We're just getting ready to look at informative speeches. Okay. Here we are, informative speeches. Why is it doing this to me? Okay. I'm only bad at technology here at school. I don't know why. Okay. So types of informative speeches. We already said that informative speeches raise awareness, knowledge, understanding, but they can be about anything. They can be about objects, processes, events, concepts, peoples, all different kinds of things. So we want to establish some guidelines, and so some things to talk about is just reiterating that it's all about our audience when we're giving a speech. So some things we can do to increase the effectiveness of the speech is to connect with the values and experiences of our listeners. And I refer to this as the WIFM. The WIFM is the what is in it for me, right? That's all the audience cares about. What's in it for me? How is this going to help me, right? So connecting with the audience, and giving them the WIFM, why they should know what's in it for them. And then you guys talked about this before about motivating your audience. And then we talked about building credibility. And then another important thing is to be able to adapt to diversity. So, you know, our audience could be all surgeons, but some may be GYNs and some may be ENTs and some may be cardiac surgeons. So we have to think about that as well when we're preparing our speech. And then easy to follow, that's always a good rule. And then getting them involved, we already talked about. As far as persuasive speaking, in persuasive speaking, we want to look at 3 different things. So let's just get them out here. Persuasive speaking, we want to elicit some sort of change in other people, in our audience. And so the book talks about 3 pillars of persuasive thinking. And the first one is ethos. And ethos is our personal character. That is our own integrity, our goodwill, our enthusiasm, our those kinds of things that create that first pillar. The second pillar is pathos, which is our emotional proofs, the passion that our audience hears for our topic. Like you said, Kid President was really enthusiastic and he was happy, and you know, you get the sense that he really loves like what he's doing and what he's talking about. So that it could also be, besides that, could be fear, love, compassion, any type of emotion, because we're going to play on our audience's emotions when we are doing a persuasive speech. And then the last thing is called logical proofs, or logos. And logos are the arguments or the reasoning behind what we're telling our audience. And then we want to show them the evidence. The book talks about a specific model, and it was developed to address logical reasoning in persuasive speaking. And so there's 3 things that we want to think about when we're giving a persuasive speech. And the first one is the claims, right? And so I've just created some examples for you. And so the claim is the assertion, right? And so here, for my persuasive speech, my claim is that cake is healthy. Don't laugh, Mrs. Brombeck. Cake is healthy. So that's my claim, right? So I got to prove it, right? So we need grounds, and grounds is the evidence or the data. Although when I think of grounds, I think of coffee. But they say that it's the evidence or the numbers, the statistics, right? And so I did a little bit of research about cake and is it healthy? And I did find a study. I found a study that said, it was from 2015. It said that they surveyed, well, first they had 928 people, they fed them chocolate cake, all right? And then they surveyed them afterwards to see how they were feeling. And a majority of those that were surveyed said that they believed eating the chocolate cake increased their psychological performance. Aha, see, cake is healthy. I'm building a case for my claims, right? But, you know, that could have been, I don't know, it could have been my community that they surveyed, right? So what gives this credibility? What warrants the grounds? And so that's the third thing. And the warrant is the relevancy. And these participants were from the University of New York. Now, I don't know how good of an example of a warrant this is, but it wasn't just a random group of people that were, you know, at a food truck convention. All right. So the warrants are what's going to give your grounds or your evidence credibility and relevance. Okay, does this make sense? Okay. In addition to that, credibility and organization are two other things we consider. We talked about credibility quite a bit already. As far as organization, we just want to make sure, again, we are thinking about our listeners, that we give a summary of our main points, that we have well-developed transitions, and that everything that we're talking about when we're giving our speech relates back to our thesis or our main point of our speech. So basically, 3 additional components that the book talks about that makes an effective persuasive speech are our ability to adapt to our listeners, that we create common ground with our listeners, and that we avoid using fallacies. And it gives some examples of fallacies on page 328, but basically these are like falsities, right? And so we want to avoid those types of things in our speeches. Unless it's for entertainment, maybe fallacies have a place, I don't know. Okay, that is all about speeches or public speaking. So what questions do you have still about speeches? And was this helpful? Or are you just clapping because it's over? Okay, that's okay. You can just clap because it's over. Okay, no questions?
Yes, actually I do.
Okay.
So as far as the speech, we're gonna have a slide to go along with the speech. So we'll be presenting the slides and giving the speech at the same time, correct?
Yes.
All right, perfect. I was trying to read the rubric and then directions while we were on break, so I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. I will give you the host with the most, and you'll be able to share your screen. Anything else?
When building our cases for our persuasive speeches, are we still supposed to look for unbiased research that supports the claims? Because that's kind of hard.
Well, I think from that perspective, what I think of is like, let's say you're trying to persuade your listeners that cake is healthy. If you find sources that support that cake is healthy, just look at the credibility of the source and try to assess for bias of the source, like the toothpaste example that I gave. You know, if Betty Crocker is saying everybody should eat Betty Crocker cakes because they, you know, make you grow up big and strong and they've sponsored the study, then that could have bias. Does that make sense? But you're going to look for stuff that supports your claim for sure. Just, you know, give a little bit of attention to the credibility of the source, if that makes sense. Kylie, you're absolutely right. That's a fantastic tip in using Google Scholar. I use that as well. Yep.
Is the minimum 5 minutes or is that the max?
Don't go giving a 20-minute speech, Juan.
All right. That's what I was shooting for.
Yeah, just for the sake of time, because I would love to hear your 20-minute speech. Just because there's 30 of us and we kind of have this limited amount of time together, if we could keep it around 5 to 7 minutes, that would be fantastic. If we go a little bit over, some of us, that's okay. So try to keep it close to 5 if you can. I know that's not very much time, but we might be able to stretch it to 10 for some of us, but you know, that's if it's 10 minutes per speech, that's 300 minutes. And that's more than one class period that we have. So 5 minutes would be more manageable from that perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. What else? Anything else? Okay, well, I'm excited about your speeches. We're going to try to take a field trip. It's a web field trip. Don't worry, you don't have to get up and move at all. So we'll see. We'll see if we can. Let me go here. We're going to look at the APA sample paper if my Google is responding. Maybe thinking about it. Now, let's see if I can expand this. Come on. Okay. Can you guys see that okay? Okay, so this is the OWL Purdue website. If you look in the resources section of the class, I also uploaded this paper as just a PDF document. So you can definitely access it from there. And I know we're not writing papers yet. We will. But this is a good resource for you, not just for if you have to write a paper, but even for your threaded discussions. You know, your threaded discussions don't have to have title pages or anything. But one of the parts that is always helpful, I'm just going to go all the way to the bottom of this really long paper. Okay, are the references, right? So that seems like to me, in the years that I've been doing this, that students have the most difficulty with writing the references and doing the citing. All right, so when you're writing a threaded discussion, let's say, and you use your textbook, there's two things that have to happen. One, you have to have a reference. And so this gives you an idea of what that formatting should look like, okay? For APA formatting, it's going to be the authors that go first, and then the publication year, and then your title of your journal or your book or whatever. If it's a journal, then that is going to come next. And then they like to have the volume and the issue numbers and your page numbers if applicable. And then this DOI number is a special identifier for this particular article or journal article, I guess. Not all of them have DOI numbers. If they don't, then you would just put the URL. Like if you found it on Google Scholar and you followed a link to an article, let's say. In the library, it's nice because there's a little icon that you can click on that says cite. And then you can choose APA and it'll give you the reference. They're not always correct, but they're pretty close. Some common things that I see is writing the author's full names out when you only want to put last name, comma, first initial, or if they have a middle name and initial, then it would be last name, first initial, middle initial, and comma, and the next person, you know, and so on and so forth. So referencing and citing seem to be two of the things. So here is a good resource for you. Also on the OWL Purdue website, you can see here where on this left side, it says in-text citations, the basics, authors, blah, 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 reference list, so on and so forth. So this is also a good tool for you to use to determine how to put together a reference, whether it's a book or a video, or it was a personal conversation you had with someone, or a journal article, or whatever. Having said that, so that's the first piece. So let's talk about the second piece. The second piece is going to be that in-text citation. So let me just see if I can find one here really quickly. When you want an in-text citation, there's none to be found. Looking for a good one. Stand by, stand by, stand by. They need to use more in-text citations. Okay. Okay, here we go. So, and then this gives some little guidelines here on the side too. But here's one that like has two authors. So whenever you're writing something, like let's say you're writing something from the textbook about persuasive speeches, and it's content from there, at the end of wherever you've talked about that, that's where you want your in-text citation to go. And so this one here, this Hirai and Koizumi, is the two authors, and then you need the publication date. Okay, so this is how it's always going to be set up. Maybe there's one author, maybe there's two. If there's more than two, then you only list the first author and you follow it by ET space AL dot, which is et al. So, and then the publication date. If you are doing a direct quote and you're writing verbatim out of the textbook or the source or whatever, which I discourage you from doing unless there's just no other way you can do it, then you're going to need to add the page number. So can you see here how they mentioned the author's name? So this is another way you can do an in-text citation. You mention the author's name and then you follow it with the publication date in parentheses. And then this writer started their quote right down here at the, right? And then it ends here at attractive. And then since they mentioned the author and the publication date up here at Vulture, then all they need to do is finish it up with the page number. All right, so that's another way you can do a citation. You can mention the author's names, then follow it by the publication date. If it wasn't an exact quote, then you wouldn't need the page number, just the author's last name and the publication date. One thing that I see with the Surge Tech book, there's two authors, and I'll see the two authors listed in the reference, but then only one author listed in the citation. So make sure both of them are there. Questions about this? Okay. Something else I was going to say is, this cite your source automatically in APA is sometimes awesome and sometimes not so awesome. Sometimes it depends on like where you put in your, there are some citation generators, and if you don't put like the author's last names in the right place, or if you put the organization, say it's the Association of Surgical Technology, I've seen a couple students use the citation software, and then I get the reference that says technologist, comma, Association of Surgical. Okay, because the citation software thinks that that's an author, and so it takes technology as the author's last name and puts it in the front, and then it uses some abbreviations and it's not right, and then that's just weird. So I'm not a huge fan of those citation managers. It's okay if you are. I would just look at the formatting and make sure that it makes sense. If you have a source that is like the Association of Surgical Technology, and you would put that as the author, right? So it would go in the author spot. And then when you do your citation, you would put in parentheses, Association of Surgical Technology, comma, and the publication date in the body of your paper or your threaded discussion or what have you. Yeah, so I think that those are some of the main things that I wanted to cover with APA. As far as references and citations, show you that what this resource looks like. There's also writing resources. So if you click here right under general writing, there's like grammar, mechanics, punctuation. So any writing questions that you have or concerns, or if there's any cloudiness, this is a good place to go as well for that. And aside from that, you know, if things are still confusing or they don't make sense, or you want me to look over a reference or a post before you post it, that's perfectly fine. I don't have a problem with that. I would ask that you give me a little bit of leeway. So if it's due at 5 o'clock tonight, probably sending it to me right now is not the best idea, because it's going to be really hard for me to get it, to look at it and give it the attention that it needs and get it back to you. So, you know, I'm perfectly fine. I have other students that can, you know, say, can you take a look at this? Anytime we have papers due, I'm more than happy to edit or give feedback on your paper. You know, I'll give you all the feedback that you would need to get 100% on your paper. I have no problem with that. I just need a little bit of time to be able to do that. So, but I'm more than happy to. Okay, I've stopped sharing. So, yeah. So when you guys are doing your PowerPoint, it's the same thing. If you use a source, let's say you use a source, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, right? And that's a .gov or whatever. You don't put websites on a reference list. You would just say, you know, this is the statistic, and then at the end in parentheses, you're going to put bls.org. All right, you can say that the Bureau of Labor Statistics indicates that, you know, there's 3 million surge techs in the world, parentheses, bls.gov or whatever. So if it's something that, a source that you're using that does have an author though, you would want to put that with that information on your PowerPoints. And then you also want to have a reference slide at the end. So outside of those 3 to 5 slides that you need, make sure that there is a reference slide that matches your citations. What questions do you have? I know you're going to have a lot for me later, so ask them now. Because I'll probably be in bed by 7, I'm not going to lie. I've been up at like 2:30 the last 2 mornings. So
I just want to make sure I understood you correctly. So if it's like DLS, you just put it in the parentheses at the end of your statement. But if there's like an actual author within that website, then you would actually list that in your source page. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so if it's like, yeah, if there's not an author and it's just the website, but you want to put the .org, .com, you know, whatever it is, like in your parentheses, if there isn't any author and it's just like the website information. But if you have a website where there's like an article that's been written by an author, then you want to go ahead and reference that like you normally would with the author, the publication date, the name of the article, and then your URL you would tag on at the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good question. What else? Trying to think of other things that I've seen I can share with you guys that I see commonly in the threaded discussions. Probably if you write less than 3 sentences, I'm going to tell you that it's not a well-developed paragraph. I expect at least 4 sentences for a well-developed paragraph. You at least have to, well, I think one of my professors put it best. She said, when you're writing a paragraph, tell me what you're going to tell me, then tell me, and then tell me what you told me. Right? So your first sentence in a paragraph is going to introduce what your reader is going to learn, and then you're going to give the meat and potatoes, and then you're going to finish up with a 1-sentence summary. So to me, at least 4 sentences for that well-developed paragraph. When you do your peer responses, I'm going to be looking for substantive responses. So some examples of not substantive responses that wouldn't get you full credit would be like, I agree. Great post. Awesome job. Okay, those don't facilitate discussion. It's not substantive posts. You want something that's going to carry the discussion forward. That's what I'm looking for. If you just put, I agree what you said, and then in quotes, you just put half of your peer's response, that's not a substantive response either. So, you know, your peer responses do not have to have research, but they do have to carry the discussion forward, contribute an experience, an opinion, a viewpoint. Additional research is fine too, if you so choose. Maybe asking your classmate a question to kind of further the discussion is good as well.
I have a question on that. If they reply with a question and you answer that question, does that count as like your second comment, or does it literally have to be like 2 separate comments on 2 other people and also answering the question?
Nope. If you respond to a question and it's a substantive post, then it counts. It doesn't matter if it's, you know, it doesn't matter who asked it or if it's in response to yours or whatever, just responding to 2 peers, period. And then that goes for us instructors as well. So as I'm looking over your threaded discussions, I'll make comments. I'll add to the discussion. I'll ask a question, and responding to me also counts as a peer response. Okay, good question. What else? Let me see if I got through my agenda.
How many references you need to have?
At least 1. I mean, for your threaded discussions, is that what you're asking?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at least 1. So there isn't like a minimum, you know, that I have in my mind. Just, you know, some of the threaded discussions have like several parts. So just in your initial response, making sure that you're kind of hitting all of those surfaces. And then, you know, if one source is sufficient to just answer what you know, to answer everything, then that's perfectly fine. If not, then you might have to go searching for a second one. Good question. Anything else? All right, so what's due for Tuesday?
Your Flipgrid responses and the threaded discussions.
Yes, ma'am. Threaded discussions 1 and 2. I'll be looking at your posts this weekend. Flipgrid, if you can swing it. I will still try to do some research, some troubleshooting stuff, and if I find out anything, I'll reach out to you guys about that. And then chapters 3 and 4, just make sure you look over chapters 3 and 4. Okay. But I will see you before Tuesday, right? We have search tech class. Woohoo! So I'll see you in search tech class on Monday. It'll actually be all 3 of us, Mrs. G, Mrs. Stolp, and myself. So we'll all be there. You'll probably see them in and around your classes, threaded discussions, not this class, but your search tech class, because we're teaching that as a team. So, which is really cool. You get to pick all 3 of our brains. All righty. Everybody's good with their speech topics. Okay. So let me talk to you about the Blackboard activity. All right. The Blackboard activity, it'll be located in today's content of the class. That's where you'll post it. All right. And so here is what I would like you to do. If you look in your book on page, hold on one second, wait for it. 309. 8675309. Okay. 309. And on 309, if I could get there in my book, is some little activities called sharpen your skills, sharpen your skill. So we're going to do for our Blackboard activity number 2, which is organize your informative speech. Okay, so you can just type this up in a Microsoft Word document, and it's going to kind of lead you through thinking, reflecting, and planning and organizing your informative speech. So each of those little blanks you'll just type out, you'll fill in the blanks. And then you won't do the for further reflection. It's just that number 2 of the sharpen your skills. Okay, so you're going to think about things like how you're going to capture your listener's attention. You're going to write your thesis statement, how you're going to establish credibility, blah, blah, blah. Think about transitions, organization, and then some points to support, and then a conclusion. Okay, focusing on your conclusion. So an intro, a body, and a conclusion. Okay, questions about that? Oh, the page is 309. The page is 309, Grisha. Yeah, thanks, Kylie.
Do we read somebody else's and respond to theirs for this Blackboard activity?
So the Blackboard activity is just something that you do on your own. It's just going to be an assignment. Yeah, it's not a threaded discussion. Yep, good question. So all you have to do is just fill this out in regards to your